Welcome aboard Flight Plan Quick Consults, the podcast designed to bring busy veterinary leaders practical insights in 20 minutes or less. I'm Brenda Tassava Medina, and today we're doing something a little different. Over the past several months, we've had incredible conversations with consultants, practice leaders, and industry experts about some of the biggest challenges facing veterinary medicine right now. Everything from staffing and burnout to scheduling, phone systems, pricing strategy, culture, and operational metrics. After listening back through these episodes, I started noticing something interesting. The same themes kept surfacing over and over again, much like the same themes in the practices I work with surface over and over again. There were different experts on our calls, different practices, different problems, but the patterns were remarkably consistent. So today's episode is a curated commentary episode. It's a chance to zoom out, connect the dots, and talk about what high functioning veterinary practices seem to understand that struggling practices often miss. This isn't about perfection. This isn't about having the biggest hospital or the most advanced technology. It's about operational clarity, and it's about leadership consistency and creating systems that both support people and patients. So buckle up and let's chart today's course. So, theme number one, the biggest problems are rarely the real problem. One of the clearest patterns across nearly every episode we recorded is this. The problem leaders think they have is often not the actual problem. And as a consultant, this really resonates with me as clients often come to me with what they believe the problem is, when in fact it's almost always something deeper. Practices say we have a staffing issue, but when we dig deeper, it's often unclear workflows, poor communication, unmanaged schedules, inconsistent leadership, or operational chaos that's creating unnecessary stress for everyone. A hospital says our doctors are burned out, but then we discover doctors are answering the phones, they're filling medications, they're troubleshooting room turnover, they're hunting for supplies, or doing technician level tasks all day long. That's not just burnout, that's a systems design issue that's contributing to the burnout. Another practice says clients are angry about prices, but sometimes what clients are actually frustrated by is long wait times, poor communication, confusion, inconsistency, or the biggest one is a lack of perceived value because we're just not communicating it. And I think this matters because veterinary leaders often move immediately towards tactical solutions before fully diagnosing the operational root cause. I remember one guest panelist in a prior episode said something that really struck me. Friction is data. I love that phrase because friction tells us where systems are breaking down. If your phones are constantly chaotic, that's data. If doctors never leave on time, that's data. If team members are emotionally exhausted, that's data. High functioning practices don't ignore friction, they investigate it. Theme number two, the best practices designed for flow, not heroics. So one topic that came up repeatedly was workflow. I love workflow. It's one of my focuses when I'm working with practices. And honestly, I think workflow is one of the most underestimated drivers of both profitability and well-being in veterinary medicine. Too many practices are surviving on heroics. You know exactly what I mean when I say this. It's the technician who somehow keeps the whole hospital afloat, or the manager solving 47 problems a day. It's that doctor who's skipping lunch to stay caught up. And it's the CSR multitasking at impossible levels. Our brains were not designed to multitask the way we ask our CSRs to. And while these people are extraordinary, heroics are not sustainable systems. The practices that consistently function at a high level tend to focus on flow instead. Flow and communication, flow in scheduling, flow in exam rooms, and flow in decision making. They reduce unnecessary friction points. One of the strongest examples of this was in our discussions around exam room bottlenecks. Many hospitals think that they need more doctors, or they need more appointments, or longer hours. But sometimes what they actually need is better technician utilization, improved room turnover, getting those clients out in a timely manner, clearer delegation, and better pre appointment preparation. Small operational improvements create massive downstream effects in our flow. And here's another thing I've noticed: high functioning practices protect cognitive bandwidth. They understand that every unnecessary interruption costs energy. Every, hey, I have a quick question for you, or every missing supply that they're hunting for, every unclear process that gets done just a little bit differently each time, depending upon who the doctor is, every poorly managed callback. All of those little things accumulate. Operational chaos is emotionally expensive, and the best leaders know that reducing chaos is actually a form of well being support. Theme number three: culture is built through consistency, not motivation. Another major theme across our episodes has been culture, and I think veterinary medicine sometimes talks about culture in overly abstract ways. People say we want a great culture, but culture is not a slogan on a wall. It's not that set of core values that you crafted when you opened the practice and you placed in a drawer somewhere and can't find now. Culture is how conflict is handled. It's how accountability is modeled. It's how information is communicated. It's how people are coached. And most importantly, it's what behaviors leadership tolerates. One thing I consistently hear from successful leaders is that teams thrive when expectations are clear. They're not harsh, they're not rigid, they're clear. Healthy teams don't require mind reading. And honestly, many team frustrations come from ambiguity. People don't know what success looks like. They don't know who owns what. They don't know who to go to. And they don't know what matters most or whether leadership will consistently support standards. One of the most interesting conversations we had involved middle management leadership because many practices unintentionally promote excellent technicians or CSRs into leadership roles without actually teaching leadership skills. And then we wonder why those leaders struggle with accountability conversations, coaching, delegation, or emotional regulation. Leadership is a skill set. It's not a personality trait and it's not a natural talent. And high performing cultures usually have one thing in common: they intentionally develop leaders, not just doctors, not just owners and practice managers, leaders at every level. Theme number four: client experience is now a competitive advantage. One of the strongest shifts we've discussed on this podcast is how much client expectations have changed, especially post-COVID. Today's clients compare veterinary experiences against every other service experience they have, not just other veterinary hospitals. They're comparing us against Amazon, Uber, Starbucks, online banking, food delivery apps, and modern healthcare systems. That doesn't mean veterinary medicine should become transactional, but it does mean convenience matters, communication matters, responsiveness matters. And one of the clearest examples of this is our phones. Our phone systems are often the front door to the practice, yet many hospitals still treat phones as an unavoidable burden instead of a strategic client experience system. Did you hear me say that? A strategic client experience system. That makes you think about phones a little bit differently, doesn't it? So think about this. Clients often decide whether they trust your practice before they ever walk through the door. They make these decisions based on how quickly someone answers the phone, their tone of voice, how much empathy is expressed, the level of confidence in what they're explaining to them, the clarity around what their pet needs and what that might cost, and whether the interaction feels organized. Here's the part that I think is especially important. Good client experience is not about sounding scripted, it's about reducing uncertainty. People want to feel informed, they want to feel guided, they want to feel acknowledged, and most importantly, cared for. When practices improve communication systems, they often see improvements in compliance, in retention, scheduling efficiency, and team morale because it's so much less stressful when they're prepared to communicate more effectively. And yes, we even see revenue improve. Theme number 5, metrics should create clarity, not fear. One of my favorite recurring themes on the podcast has been the conversation around metrics, because I think many veterinary professionals have complicated feelings about numbers. Metrics sometimes feel cold or corporate or intimidating, but the best leaders we've spoken with don't use metrics to punish people. They use metrics to understand reality. Metrics are instruments on the dashboard. They help answer questions like, are we truly busy or are we just inefficient? Are our phones converting appointments? Are doctors practicing at the top of their license? Are we retaining clients? Is your schedule aligned with demand? Are we pricing strategically? And most importantly, metrics help remove emotion from operational decision making. Because without data, practices often manage based on assumptions, anecdotes, our gut feeling, or whoever's the loudest in the moment. But numbers create clarity. Now, I also think it's critical that practices don't become obsessed with measuring everything. The goal is actionable insight. A few meaningful KPIs consistently reviewed are far more powerful than endless reports nobody uses. So, after all these conversations, after all these episodes, what do I think is the biggest differentiator between struggling practices and thriving ones? It's not perfection, it's intentionality. High functioning practices are intentional about communication, about leadership, about how they're going to schedule their clients as well as their doctors and staff. They're intentional about their workflow. They take a step back and they really dissect that workflow and they problem solve for those hurdles that they encounter. They're intentional about expectations. Everyone understands where to go, what to do, who they need to go to, what they're responsible for. They're intentional about their metrics, and they're equally intentional about their culture and what that means to them. They don't leave critical systems to chance. And perhaps most importantly, they understand that operational health and human well being are deeply connected. When systems improve, we see stress decreases. We see that communication improves and client trust grows and teams become more sustainable and they stay longer. Veterinary medicine is incredibly hard work, but practices do not have to operate in constant survival mode. Sometimes the breakthrough isn't adding more effort. Sometimes it's redesigning the way the work flows. Thank you for flying with us on Flight Plan Quick Consults. If this episode resonated with you, I'd encourage you to go back and revisit some of our earlier conversations with fresh ears, because I think you'll start hearing these same patterns too. Until next time, keep your mission clear, your team aligned, and your practice soaring. This is Flight Plan Quick Consults, where veterinary vision meets velocity.